Okay, welcome. I'm so glad to have you here with me today, John, for this talk time where we're going to be talking about your book, Dancing with Fire, along with other concepts that are in that book. And, you know, you've written some other books too, so we may have some discussion around some of those other topics that are very enjoyable to have you on. So I'm so glad to welcome you here from your office.
Thanks so much.
And let me just say a little bit about you to our audience that's here today. This most recent book, Dancing with Fire, you've won a really cool award for, the Spirituality and Practice Award, which is very exciting. You've written that book. You've also written a book called The Authentic Heart, and one on love and betrayal, broken trust in intimate relationships. And then for me, another thing that you've written that's quite exciting is the chapter that you did on spirituality in the EFT casebook, the Emotionally Focused Therapy casebook, because it's a book that's quite near and dear to me, and it's very nice that you have co-authored a chapter with Sue Johnson. You are a licensed marriage and family therapist and been in practice for, 30 years or something in the San Francisco Bay Area, and speak internationally and conduct workshops as well on focusing on meditation and these concepts that we're going to be sharing with today. You also have a great blog on Psychology Today, which is quite popular, and you've appeared on TV shows too, like CNN. So I'm so excited to have you on Talk Time with me today.
Thanks so much. Lovely to be here.
So we've your book, Dancing with Fire, is sharing with people how to use mindfulness in intimate relationships. Can you just tell us a little bit about those concepts, and you know that it's a little bit of a tricky thing maybe to bridge, and why it was important for you to write this book?
Sure, yeah, I'd love to talk about that. Yeah, you know, often in relationships we get stuck in blaming and criticizing and attacking. You know, we enact those four things that John Gottman talks about, the four horsemen of the apocalypse: criticism, contempt, stonewalling, and defensiveness. Often that's what we do in our relationships. And in order not to do that, we need to learn how to be mindful of what we're actually experiencing inside, to really acknowledge it, to be aware, to be mindful of what we're really feeling, and then to be courageous enough to reveal those feelings, which are usually more vulnerable feelings, to people who we want to be close to. So the book is a lot about how the importance of honoring our experience just as it is, not judging ourselves, not getting caught in shame, and just really being authentic, fully authentic with what we're noticing, what we're experiencing inside, and being courageously vulnerable in our relationships to share that with each other. That's the foundation for the kind of intimacy that we're all longing for.
So it sounds really good, John, how does one kind of do that, learn to do that? And then it seems like sometimes in my practice with couples, you know, mindfulness or meditation especially can be used as a way for separation, not a way to bring closeness. So maybe a little bit how to, and a little bit starting to bridge that separation and closeness.
Well, that's what I found too. And you know, in my earlier meditation career, I was often guilty of that as well, using the practice to avoid connection. So when I see that happening now with people, it drives me crazy, and that's one reason I wrote the book, to try to encourage people to realize that meditation, spiritual practice, is not about being not attached. It's not about non-attachment from people. It's learning how to be non-attached to some things so that we can be more connected to other things. So for example, if we're attached to our judgments and our criticisms of another person, or we're attached to having to be perfect or having to be right, or our accusations or perceptions of other people. You know, you're always so self-centered. You only think about yourself. Your work is more important than me. mean, those are perceptions. Those are our analysis of the other. And what we need to do is slow down, go inside, take a breath, be aware. And it takes time to go inside, be aware of what we're actually experiencing. Maybe our stomach is tight, and that's connected to some sadness, or our throat is constricted. We have some fear, maybe. So if we can pause, slow down enough to access what we're feeling, then we have something new and different to share with people we want to be close to. We can share those more tender feelings, and that's much more likely to bring people toward us. So the mindfulness practice, the meditation practice is then used not to avoid relationship, avoid contact, but we use it to enrich our contact, to deepen our connections with each other.
Right. So
Exciting possibility. That's to bridge those two together, the inner work and the connecting with life, connecting with our inner life. And meditation is like being intimate with yourself. So the more intimate we are with ourselves, really knowing what we're feeling, what we're wanting, what we're longing for, then we can reveal that to other people, and they can see more into our heart, and they're much more likely to want to come toward us when they see those more tender feelings inside of us.
So that's kind of risky or difficult, perhaps, to, I mean, both, we're talking about two kind of big challenges. One is to go in and feel our feelings and slow that down, and then somehow to share, to use that understanding to share. Both of those are kind of maybe hard to learn how to do.
That's why we call it a practice. It doesn't mean practice doesn't mean perfect. So it's an ongoing lifetime practice that we can gradually get better at, but we're going to fall back, make mistakes. It's okay. It's part of being human. But yeah, there's a practice of attending to what we're experiencing inside. It's not easy to do, but it's also not easy. The other path is not easy too. Being unconscious isn't so easy. In one way it's easy, but it doesn't lead to very good results. So this is a path of awakening to what we're actually experiencing inside, honoring it fully. It's actually simple, but it's not easy. In a way, it's simple to slow down, attend to what we're noticing. You know, often we didn't get encouragement, of course. Growing up, we didn't get encouragement to notice what we're feeling. We often got shamed and criticized. And people distanced from us when we showed our authentic feelings. So sadly, that often happens. But the path toward intimacy is to create a climate where people are more likely to be invited toward us. And that climate's created by a practice of being intimate with our own experience, connected to ourselves, and then revealing that. It takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of strength. You know, often people think they're weak if they share these vulnerable, tender feelings, but it's a tremendous act of inner strength. It's being a warrior of the heart to share our tenderness with each other.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way to say that, to be a warrior of the heart. And it does take courage. I know when, can we maybe go back to this idea about being attached to maybe the things that aren't going to help us so much, or this idea between attachment and detachment, because often there's something around meditation about, you know, not being attached. So can we talk about that for a bit?
Probably the most pivotal chapter in the book is called The Suffering Created by Attachment or Non-Attachment. And there's a lot of belief in Buddhist circles and spiritual communities that spiritual path toward awakening needs to not be so attached. But we're wired for connection, so that doesn't really work. to be not attached from people. We need people, we need community. In Buddhist terms, one of the refuge vows is to take refuge in the Sangha. The Sangha means the community of people on the path. And the Buddha said friendship is the whole of the holy life. Having good friends is an essential part of the holy life. So we need community, we need people. And if we want to look at, I mean, it's not that desire creates suffering. Often there's a word tanha in Pali, which people translate as desire or longing, and that leading to suffering. But a better translation that Buddhist teachers are talking about is really clinging and craving is what creates suffering, not desire. Desire is just how we're wired. Being alive means we have desire, we have longing. And if we think we're supposed to eliminate that, we're being destructive to ourselves. It doesn't work. What we have to do is learn how to have a relationship with our desires and longings, how to be with them in a gentle, caring way. And then they begin to settle, because what happens is we tend to cling and crave to things. Often what we cling to often is our ideas. We want to be right. We cling to our beliefs of what's wrong with the other person. And it gives us a certain kind of weird satisfaction. If I can, and I insist that these are the things that are wrong with you, and we all see this as couples therapists, right? People come in and they want us to fix their partner, change their partner, instead of going inside and learning how to reveal what they're really feeling in a more tender, vulnerable way. So the path of mindfulness, if we can slow them down, I mean, this is all part of the EFT work too, to help people connect with what they're actually experiencing, and take the risk to share that with each other. And things happen. So, yeah, in summary, the path is not about being detached, it's about being non-attached to some things, our judgments, our criticisms, having to be right, so that we can be more connected to other things, namely people and life. We're much more open to an awake relationship to people and to life if we can notice and relinquish these different kinds of clingings and cravings that we get into. This insistence that we're right, for example, or having to be perfect.
Mm. So this attachment, detachment, I guess to think about the attachment more in the way of clinging, that sense of panic or desperation or something when we are holding on to something so tightly that perhaps a rigidness comes in, we're not able to let others in or other thoughts in, or like right or wrong, I think was an excellent example about how we might cling to something out of this maybe a fear of getting it wrong.
Yeah, often fear is behind a lot of these things that we're clinging to being right. We're afraid of losing the connection. So often fear drives us to, we want to shake the other person so that they kind of come toward us by criticizing them and judging them. And sadly, it just pushes people further away. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, there's a desperation in our desires and in our need for connection. We so much want it, but the way we express it often is destructive. So if we can learn to be with it, even kind of notice how it feels in our body before we express it, take a pause. Pausing is a good practice. It's one of the important pivotal things in the focusing process. Maybe we can talk a little bit about later, that I use a lot with people, is to pause, slow down. How are you feeling in your body right now? I'll often ask people that in my sessions, both individuals and couples. Well, how are you feeling in your body right now as you're talking about that? Can you just take a moment? Just take a moment, go inside. Where do you notice that inside in your body? Mm-hmm. And if people can begin to just access their bodily experience, they kind of get out of their heads, which is always a good thing, and get more connected to what's really going on inside. Like, oh yeah, my stomach is so tight. It's, yeah, I'm feeling afraid. I'm feeling afraid of losing this connection. And then they can express it in a more sweet way, not with these barbs and these sharp edges and these jabs that we tend to do with our partner, with each other. And when they express it in this more sweet, open way, it just melts people's hearts. They want to come toward us. Much more likely to want to come toward us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So those are some really nice practical steps for people to start to utilize as they're developing a mindful practice, to pause, take a breath, kind of slow down, and then just notice all of the sensations that are happening internally. Sometimes, John, though, it's it doesn't feel good, or it's scary, or maybe we feel bad about ourselves for having these kind of bad feelings.
Yeah, often we grow up with a lot of shame. Shame is a thing I often try to educate my clients about having these more vulnerable, tender feelings. We think something's wrong with us, we're a failure, we're defective. What's wrong with me for feeling afraid, or feeling sad, or feeling hurt? It means I'm weak. People so harshly judge themselves. So it's kind of an inner critic that happens from the mind, that we think, what's wrong with me? I'm defective. And then in the body, there's this sense of shame, this like sinking feeling, this contraction, this painful feeling of feeling really small and insignificant. And we want to hide those feelings from each other because we think they're really terrible feelings. We want to hide them from ourselves. But it's again an act of great courage. So it's just simply, I've got this shame in me that's coming up right now. Boy, and be curious about it. To be curious about our experience is very powerful. Like, I'm noticing the sense of shame. Like, I'm feeling this fear, and I think there's something wrong with me for feeling fear, and that I'm gonna push you away if I share this fear. Is that okay? Is it okay to share my fear with you? Are you open to hearing that, or is that something you really don't want to hear? And people usually want to hear our vulnerability because it's very connecting to hear somebody's vulnerability. That's the thing. We lose sight of that so easily. That the connection is often in the vulnerability, in the tenderness.
Mm-hmm. So taking the time to do that, can I go back for just a minute about, you were talking about desire and longing, and sometimes we have this idea. I mean, can you give us an example perhaps, or give me an example, because sometimes it can feel like so full of desire or longing that it maybe feels selfish or something like that, right? So what's an example of being in our desire or longing and finding a balance or an okayness with that?
Yeah, in my book I call it sacred longing. I see it as a sacred thing, a holy longing, because it connects us with life. It's a beautiful thing to have longing. It's not a negative thing. It's part of being alive. So if we can just simply notice, boy, you were working all day, you stayed late at work, and I just noticed I was really started missing you. And I really enjoy our time together. Really was looking forward to you coming home. And next time if you could call to let me know that you're going to be as late as you were, it would really be helpful, because I start to get afraid when I don't hear from you. I have this longing to connect and to feel reassured sometimes, and that would be really helpful and so much appreciated if you could stay in contact with me during the day. So something like that, something in the direction of finding a tender way to say it instead of the usual way people will say it. Like, well, what's wrong with you? You don't care about me. You don't care about the relationship. You never call me. You might as well just spend the night at the office. Ouch, right? It's not going to bring people toward us. So if we can just acknowledge our longings and desires, what we want, and just be really gentle with it. It's a very tender spot, very vulnerable place. So we can learn to have a relationship with a vulnerable place and speak from that place. And it's a practice. We all fall short of that, but it's something to practice, to really notice the tenderness that's in that vulnerable place and reveal that to each other. Oh, I'm not hearing you. I'm losing the audio. Can you hear me? Can't hear you.
We're having a little technical problems, folks.
Okay, I can hear you now.
Okay.
You can hear me? Oh, I just lost you again. Okay, I can hear you now.
Okay. Maybe just the internet buffering a little.
Losing you. Can't hear you still. Can you hear me? You can hear me? Okay. Well, I could talk, maybe I could say a little bit of, I could talk maybe about the focusing process, because that's something I use a lot with individuals and couples. And it's based on Eugene Genlin's work. And there was a lot of research on this that he did with Carl Rogers back at the University of Chicago on what makes psychotherapy effective. And what they found in their research, they taped hundreds of sessions, and they found that when people were slowing down their speech, getting out of their heads, attending more to their vague felt sense of things. And John coined the word felt sense, which is used a lot now in different psychologies, like Peter Levine's somatic experiencing work. When people slow down and kind of grappled for words, they kind of struggled to find words that matched what they were actually experiencing. They weren't just speaking analytically. And those are the people that made the most progress in psychotherapy. So Jenlin developed this into steps that other people could learn, and then he wrote the book Focusing, which has now been translated into many, many languages. And there's the Focusing Institute in New York. They do these wonderful conferences every year, and it's a beautiful community. But he developed it into steps so people can learn to go inside in this way, where you're just taking a little time, you're noticing how things are being experienced in your body. And you're finding words and images, you're just kind of letting them come from inside. You're not trying to figure it all out in your head. And that's when the creative process has to do with tapping into our bodily felt experience. So, when I work with couples, sometimes I'll work with each part of the couple and just have them go inside, notice what they're really feeling, what they're experiencing, what they're wanting, help them find words to connect with that and then to express that to each other. It's a very powerful, very gentle process. A lot of it, I often ask people, well, can you just be gentle with that? You're noticing that fear or that sadness right now. Is the way just to be gentle with that right now? Just be gentle with that sadness. And when people can learn how to be gentle with their experience, they're more empowered to just really acknowledge what's there for them and to be able to share that with each other.
I love focusing.
Okay.
I think you can hear me now.
Yes.
Okay. I can remember when I learned how to use focusing, and took some courses around Eugene's work and had his book and really was active practicing focusing. It was so exciting. And it was also very interesting how a experience could emerge. You can maybe notice a little trigger that just felt like a little bit of a trigger. And then I'd go into my bedroom, I'd breathe, and I'd, focus. And then the experience would kind of well up inside of me.
Right.
And it was really powerful and amazing, that kind of self-discovery. And then as I practiced that, another thing that I began to learn was that if I stayed with those feelings, that I could also be curious about where did they come from.
Yeah.
And that helped me quite a bit then in making sense out of when I was triggered.
Right. Yeah, where they come from, and what could also help is to get, Jenlin calls that a felt meaning. Meanings can come from the feelings. So it might also be, like if we have fear, it might be a sense, well, I'm feeling this fear, I don't know what that's about. And if we can kind of sit with it, let it unfold, fear is about just really needing more tenderness and more acceptance of who I am with my partner. So I'm going to express that next time we get together. I need to be more accepted as I am and have my feelings heard and understood. So it reminds me of when I first learned meditation. Often the meditation teachers would say things like, well, if you have a feeling, just let it go, as if that was easy to do, right? And then they found that a lot of the students, when they were trying to let go of their feelings, they were actually dissociating from their bodies, dissociating from their feelings, and just stuffing their feelings down, so that wasn't working. So then they began to say, well, just let feelings be, which was a big step forward. Just allow them, accept them. It's kind of like a sacred allowing, like in your example. You went into your room, you just allowed the feelings to be. And just let them be, wash over you, be gentle with them. And that kind of acceptance is very powerful. But I think a third step is now necessary, where we go from letting them go to letting them be to letting them unfold. There's a message, there's a meaning often in our feelings. Like you're saying, sometimes it has to do with something that happened in our past, and it can be helpful to recognize that, to see that, this is an old wound. This is an old, it's partly how my partner talks to me, but it's also, there's a pre-existing wound here about not being heard and understood. And if we can share that with our partner, that can be very powerful Because then our partner can suddenly hear, oh, it's not just all about me. That's a relief to hear that. It's not just that I'm bad and doing the wrong thing. There's pre-existing sensitivities my partner has. So let me understand those special sensitivities my partner has and realize it's not all about me. That makes it easier for me to hear. Right?
Mm-hmm. So can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's kind of gone from, teaching about, you said let it go, to let it be, and now, what did you say now?
Well, I think a further step forward would be to let it unfold.
Let it unfold. Yeah, I think about embracing it,
Yeah. Yeah, I think about kind of letting it be means kind of, let it be there and then kind of hold it, kind of embrace it. And then just that in itself is enough, really. I mean, that in itself is very powerful, that the feelings can begin to relax and release. We get more connected to ourselves. But sometimes there's a further unfolding that wants to happen. Like, well, what are these feelings? Is there some message, some meaning in these feelings? Yeah.
It does. It actually can grow and unfold. More becomes revealed to us as we spend time and are curious or passionate maybe towards those feelings.
Yeah, and Thich Nhat Hanh, he teaches something very similar to focusing. He'll say, if a fear comes, don't say, go away, fear, I am not you. Say, oh, hello, fear. Say hello to the fear. And you and the fear kind of become one. You have a relationship with the fear. And that's a better way to work with it. So it's really interesting to see the parallels of spiritual practice and how Buddhist teachers are beginning to teach more of the meditation and the spiritual path, and how it intersects so nicely with the deepest psychological awareness that we're developing as therapists.
It does. It intersects so nicely with what we teach as therapists around doing the discovery process and then turning and sharing it with our partners or our loved one to try to build more connection. And that connection is always coming back to that desire. I guess that's when you were talking about desire. It is the sacredness of it is because it's not like I want that vacation. It has to do with wanting the relationship, perhaps.
Yes, right. And it's so powerful right now and wonderful now that the mindfulness path, the meditation path is not, okay, I'm going to retreat to my meditation cushion every time there's an inconvenient feeling. But okay, maybe I'll go to my meditation cushion, get a little calmness, some equanimity, and then I'll go to my partner, if you're in a partnership, and express what's happening for me. So the mindfulness practice isn't making you withdraw from relationship. It's empowering you more to really know what's going on inside so that you can then courageously come toward your partner and express what you're feeling in a way that's much more likely to be heard because you have a little more equanimity around it, a little more spaciousness around it.
Mm-hmm. So that's a really lovely way to describe it. When I first started meditating and then more recently, I guess, in the last decade or so, maybe that's recent, remembering Dan Siegel talking about, I think it was him who said, paying attention to your intention. And that's a piece, I guess, of developing some mindful practice, but you're really kind of describing with focusing and maybe some other pieces of meditation, that being much more expanded than merely paying attention to intention.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I see focusing as a path of mindfulness, being mindful toward your actual experience, or you can also say it's a practice of loving kindness toward yourself. Loving kindness meditation is very popular in the Buddhist tradition. And the focusing is like a way to have loving kindness for yourself. And the more you can cultivate that loving kindness for yourself, the more you can begin to extend that love toward other people. It's difficult to extend it to others when you're not feeling it at all inside. So if there's a practice that helps you feel more of that, generate a little bit more of that internally, it's very powerful then to be able to share that and extend that generosity.
Of course, that could be a little bit of a chicken and an egg question, right? Like, if we don't, if we haven't had the experience of receiving loving kindness, how do we even know to kind of give it to ourselves? And maybe I guess as adults and thinkers, readers, we are able to internalize examples from kind of within our environment, maybe outside of our relationships. Can you talk to that for a minute, John?
I think that's a really excellent and really crucial point. And the way I like to talk about that is I think both paths are really essential, that we have at least one person, hopefully more, in our life where we feel seen and understood and connected with, especially if we didn't have that with our parents growing up. Then we have a particular vulnerability there. And I agree, from attachment theory viewpoint too, obviously the research is good there, that we need to internalize the loving and available parent as a stable figure for us. And if we didn't get that, then we're especially prone to the fight, flight, freeze response. The amygdala then goes crazy if we're not feeling that bonding, that connection. So I think we need both. We need people, a therapist can provide that too. That's one of the beauties of individual therapies. We have somebody who's consistently there for us, and that's a great place to cultivate that. But also in friendships and in our partnerships, that sense of somebody, them really being there for us, that when we call, they're really there and they're present for us. And then simultaneously, or at other times, having a practice where we're developing a secure internal base within ourselves through our spiritual practice. So I think we can cultivate both. We can have the secure internal base through mindfulness or meditation practice, and then we can strengthen it even more through our relationships with each other. It kind of goes back and forth. There's a synergy that happens when we do both. There's a quote I like from Walter Kempler, a Gestalt therapist. He says, "Autonomy and intimacy are two sides of the spinning coin of life." Autonomy and intimacy, two sides of the spinning coin of life. If we can find some way to connect with our own being, find more of a secure internal base through, it could be not only meditation, but also art, creative artwork, or writing poetry, or taking walks in nature. Being in nature can do that for us. And it positions us so that we're more available for connection. So yeah, it's a chicken and egg kind of thing. They reinforce and support each other.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. They do reinforce and support each other. Mm-hmm. And that we can find these moments of reflection and gentleness, and then bring forth that and offer it, and get more of a sense from someone on the other side of us that we're okay, and that can create kind of more of a positive loop, I guess.
Yeah, I think we need that. That sense of being okay in the eyes of another is really important, and that's some people might think that's a weakness, but I think we need that. That's a very vulnerable, tender part of our heart and soul that we need to feel accepted and welcomed and wanted by another person.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, John, we have some questions here from participants in Talk Time, and let me just read one of them to you.
Alrighty.
We'll see what we can do with it. So, Tana says, as a meditator of 30 years, as well as in a relationship, my experience is that no amount of meditation has ever stopped the reactiveness of my triggers regarding my husband, my partner. It's only been after the furor that I'm able to realize that the dragon belched fire, and then I began sensing and feeling the incredible log jam that was in my body and start the despair. And I guess through the despair, able to come back into connection. And now my husband is getting more connected with his feelings and his needs, and he's joining me in the dragon belches. Yeah. I'm just curious if you can relate and what comes up for you.
Yeah, well, I really want to validate her experience here, because I really believe that meditation is not enough. And often when we go to spiritual teachers, often we get the message that all you have to do is the spiritual practice and you'll move toward awakening or toward enlightenment, and that's all we really need in our life. But I think they're missing the relationship. That's a big reason I wrote the Dancing with Fire book, to try to bring those two together. That we need to cultivate, we need to heal some of the wound through relationship. We can't totally heal that wound just by sitting on our meditation cushion, as much as I wish that were true. I just don't see that happening in people. That we need the relationship piece. We need to heal through a relationship, and I mean that can be a therapeutic relationship too. It can be very powerful. to share those. Often our feelings are amplified when we're sitting with somebody who is really attentive and interested and cares about us. I mean, that can also be a therapist who wants to know what we're feeling. And if we can by getting in touch with those feelings more clearly, they can begin to settle more. Somebody's kind of sitting with us, keeping us company as we notice those feelings. That's very powerful. And if we can do that with a partner where we're both on that same path and have an agreement that this is an important, powerful thing to do in this relationship, to be authentic with each other, to be real, and to show what we're really feeling and have that heard and understood. It enables those fires to begin to cool off a little bit, to be less reactive. So I think we need to integrate the meditation practice with a conscious path of relationship, or a path of conscious relationship, we might say.
Mm-hmm.
We're revealing our feelings to each other.
So how might you suggest, I'm just thinking about some of the couples that I work with, and some of the individuals I work with who they're not in yet to therapy for the relationship, but really want to be able to share at a deeper level with a partner, and they get that, Sue Johnson dance of distress going on. A way that, have you found some ways to suggest people after some focusing or some meditation that would be helpful for them to approach their partner about creating the kind of contract really that you're describing, where they privilege sharing or start to be able to have those kind of conversations with each other?
Yeah, well, the first thing that comes to mind is I will try to coach them, and often we'll do role playing in the session even to help them find ways to express what they're feeling inside. And oftentimes individuals will tell me, well, I do talk to my partner, I do share my feelings. And I say, well, can you tell me exactly what you say? Do you remember what you say? And then when they tell me what they said, I think, no, that's not really a feeling you're sharing. That's more of a judgment or a perception you're having of the other. Like for example, when you say, when you say that you're telling your partner that I think you're self-centered, I think you're not attentive to me. Well, those aren't exactly your feelings. And then I'll help them slow down. What are the feelings underneath that? When you say that, can you just take a moment, notice what the feelings are? Well, and maybe I'll help them a little bit too if they can't get access to it. And I might say, or they might realize that I feel sad. I feel afraid that we're not connected. I feel sadness about it. Well, how would it be to express that to your partner? Just take a moment, be with the sadness before you say anything. You say, I just want to share some feelings with you. Would that be okay? And I'm not meaning to be critical. So if I start to sound critical, please let me know, because I don't want to do that. And then your partner says, okay, yeah, you've been feeling noticing a sadness lately, that we're not having as much time together as I'd like. And I feel sad because I really love you and like you and enjoy your company. And it would really be great to have more time together. I mean, that's more likely to go well. There's no guarantees, right? It's more likely to go well if you can stay with the feeling and your vulnerability around that feeling and put that out.
I think the other thing that you said there that I want to punctuate that was so nice was sharing the intention as well. If you start to feel criticized or I start to sound critical, let me know.
Yeah, stop me.
So stop me, let me know. It's okay to apologize. Maybe we trigger something without any intention to do that. We can still get that feedback and use that to understand our partner, to understand who we're talking with a little bit more, even if we didn't intend to hurt their feelings or trigger them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that shows good intention to want to be respectful, not want to be shaming or critical in how you're expressing this. And we can so easily meander into a more critical way of saying it when we get triggered. When we get activated, the amygdala gets activated, we can so quickly become critical and attack. So to put that out, it kind of tries to build in some safety.
Yeah. Right. That helps a lot to put that intention out, I think. So one more question. And these are questions that people sent in when they registered, but also we do want to invite you to let us know if you have questions, to just chat your question, put your questions in the chat box, and we can take your question as well. Would love to have you ask a question about either using what we're talking about in therapy, with clients, with yourself, or in your own relationship. So this is another question, John. I wanted to ask how you see usefulness, the usefulness of mindfulness with managing feelings of abandonment that we can so easily drop into so quickly when we're activated by our partner.
Yeah. Yeah, that's such a common human experience, to feel abandoned, rejected, and if we can take some time and go inside and not feel shame to have those feelings, but realize that's just part of the human condition, that's how we're really experiencing right now. And, you know, and for me, from a Buddhist point of view too, realize, and from a human point of view, that feelings change. Feelings are constantly changing. You know, if we can be with the sadness, be with the sense of abandonment, not go into our heads, that's when we usually get into trouble, because we solidify in our heads this belief that there's something wrong with us. Then we kind of cling to some core belief about ourselves that, oh, there must be something wrong with me. I hear this from clients all the time. There must be something wrong with me. I'm a failure. Why can't I ever have a relationship that works? And we get caught up in that mind loop. It just solidifies this anguish within us. It creates tremendous suffering. So if we can just notice and just kind of let those thoughts go as best we can and come back to the feeling, it might just simply be sadness. But we make it much worse when not only do we have sadness, but now we think there's something wrong with us for feeling sad, for having this sense of abandonment. So if we can peel away the shame part that contaminates the simple sadness, it's much easier to, I wouldn't say it's easy, but it's easier to be than just be with the sadness and the hurt. But there's an additional piece, which I think it really helps to share it with somebody we trust too. It's hard to just carry these feelings of abandonment around inside of us alone. You know, it can also be helpful to share it with somebody who we feel is going to listen to us and attend to us in a caring way. It's just so powerful to be able to share it and, as a way to release it and open it up.
That's some of the research, of course, on shame has to do with perspective taking, which you're describing, that other people feel this. I don't need to feel ashamed or bad for feeling abandoned, that wherever I came from, something happened that would, and we all have those feelings, you know, whether they're triggered up at any one time or not.
Exactly, yeah, we're all part of the human condition. Exactly, we're all part of the human family. We all have these feelings, and it gives us more empathy for others too, to be able to have these feelings and be gentle with them. It gives us more empathy for other people when they have these feelings. And if we can create a world together where we all feel a little safer to be real, to be open, to not have this bravado, but to be willing to be vulnerable and open, we can create a much more beautiful, harmonious world together.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, that's a really lovely idea. And we want to also invite, again, maybe just sit here for a moment and let people's questions emerge around, you know, we're talking about focusing, suffering, attachment. Some of these things of not being attached, you know, letting things go. Some of these things have been so misunderstood in our culture when we've tried to enter into meditative or contemplative practices.
Right, and I took 10 years writing this book, by the way, to clarify these ideas. I've been kind of struggling with this interface for about 40 years, and it took 10 years to write the book to help clarify that. It's very tricky stuff, you know. It's easy to get off the path, you know. And I'm working with it all the time. It's still a struggle for me too, to remember to breathe and slow down and attend to myself. It's an ongoing process.
Yeah, you're kind of laying out a really nice process about noticing, breathing, slowing down, attending, and then I guess the next step is to go and share that so that we're connecting as well to others, not just to ourselves.
Right.
Okay.
there's a thought that's coming up I'd like to share too while people are maybe considering asking a question, which is the art of receiving is something that I think needs a lot of attention in our society. That often we grow up thinking that it's more noble to give than to receive. And often the way we grow up, maybe we didn't get a lot of understanding and the caring in the way we needed, so our receptors can begin to atrophy, or we begin to feel shame around having needs, or we're afraid that if we receive, then we're going to be obligated in some way to have to give something back. It's hard for us. The hard thing about receiving is we need to be vulnerable to receive somebody's compliment or their caring or a kind word or a favor that they might do for us. Just to let that in is so powerful without having to feel obligated. We don't have to, not obligated to give something back. If we want to, we can, but it's, if everybody's busy giving and no one's available to receive, then what good does all that giving do? It requires people that are willing to receive, and that increases the value of the gift. If I can feel like you're really letting in something I'm giving you, whether a kind word or a compliment, and you're letting it in, then that's a gift to me to know that it affected you, that you're receiving it in a deep way. So a nice synergy begins to happen, but often there are so many blocks we have to receiving.
Yeah.
So it's one thing I want to leave listeners with, is to bring mindfulness to the art of receiving. When somebody compliments you or gives you a gift or something, can you take a breath and even not even say thank you so quickly, but take a moment, let it in. How does it feel in your body to have received that? And that can be part of our healing, to let in good stuff when it comes toward us.
It's so true that receiving, it feels very vulnerable, and we rush past it, very quickly, or we feel embarrassed, like a little bit of shame comes up. Shouldn't have to, you shouldn't have to give to me, or it's very complex to receive.
Yeah, I think
that's a place we could feel so triggered, and a really important place to slow down around.
Yeah, I think giving is easier than receiving because we're kind of more in control when we're giving. Receiving means kind of letting go of that control.
Okay, so we have some other questions that are coming, so appreciate people asking questions. So Alistair says, I'm curious how to support a client to support them moving through shame.
Well, I think the first step is to acknowledge, to help the client recognize when shame is coming up. That's a big part of it, is just to be mindful when it's getting activated. And it comes up, shame is kind of like the many-headed hydra. As soon as you lop off one head, two more heads appear. Like shame just keeps popping up. You never quite have it totally under control. So it's something we kind of need to be continually aware of, that shame's going to keep coming up. But if we can notice it and maybe normalize it for the client, like, we all feel shame. It's just it's part of how we grow up, where we feel this. It's just part of being human. When it comes up in our sessions, let's try to identify it and acknowledge it and work with it, just by simply by noticing it and being gentle with it. Just bring some gentleness to the shame and just giving a little space if there's anything more come up around it. That would be a focusing type question as you sit with the shame and how it's in your body right now. We'll just see if anything more comes up around it as you sit with it. But it's tricky though, because you don't want the client to sink into shame and get lost in it. But shame's something people can kind of sink into and get lost. So you've got to be a little clear clinically to maybe wait for moments when that feels right, and the people have a certain kind of empowerment or strength around it. Maybe at the beginning part, you just want to do it a little more, work a little more cognitively with it, just educating them about shame and how it's normal for that to come up, and understand maybe some of the roots of it, so they realize they have shame, but they are not the shame, and understand some of the roots, some of the history of the shame, how it develops in their childhood, for example, like messages that they got from their parents or teachers or peers that they internalized. And they can begin then to get a little distance from the shame. That can be really powerful and important, get a little distance from the shame, see how it's operating, and then just be curious about, that's that shame thing coming up again, where I internalize these beliefs about myself and not being good enough or smart enough. Boy, maybe I don't need to keep doing that.
Yeah, those are very important. Understanding the emotion, shame, and as you mentioned, that shame has the action tendency to hide or to sink, right? So like that's not, as we touch it, we don't want to spend so much time that it expands it.
Right.
Right. So you're making sense out of it. We're taking perspective around it. We're joining with it. Like, you know, we're human. We all have that. It's going to come. We all have it. And that joining or normalizing is very helpful. And then I like how you're talking about this clinical judgment that we have, so that we can help the clients keep perspective and not sink into that pit of shame, because it's so talk about suffering.
Yeah, it's so debilitating, right? So to understand the history, getting a sense of the history of it, the origins of it, can be very helpful, in that it's not you. And sorting out the inner critic voices, recognizing them, and that can be worked with also, the beliefs around it, like, oh, I'm a failure. Well, you know, so the client can be encouraged to notice those critical thoughts and begin to challenge them. Well, why do you believe that? You know, just a basic good cognitive therapy around that can be helpful. Being mindful of the thoughts and then challenging them and replacing them with healthier thoughts. Well, no, I've got challenges, but I can deal with this. And doesn't mean that I'm a failure. There's something wrong with me just because I have these feelings or because this happened in my life.
Yeah, so separating the feeling from the behavior is another really nice way to keep perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thanks. Another question, John. Eve says, I really like, John, that you're capturing judgment and being empathic with self and others. When we all drop into these places at times, feelings come and go like waves of the ocean, but we don't have to suffer alone. And she says, I still get stuck with clients that find it hard to connect with their body or their inner world. Do you have any advice for working with people like this?
Yeah, one thing I would say is I wouldn't try too hard to get them in touch with their body, because you have to be very careful. You don't want to shame clients who do have difficulty accessing their body. That could just be another thing they feel bad about. What's wrong with me? I don't have touch with my body. So, but you can give it a try. You can kind of ask them periodically. Well, do you notice anything in your body? And maybe give them some hints, like, you know, well, how does your stomach feel? I wonder if there's a tightness in your stomach when you say that, or a constriction in your chest or your throat when you're talking about that. But if they don't pick up on it kind of quickly, I would tend to let that part go and just say, well, just tell me, you know, what's going on in there, and
right.
Question more general and open-ended. You know, well, what are you noticing? And so maybe an image will come. And you can even prompt them with that. Well, you know, maybe see if any image comes or memory comes. That's something we do in focusing too. It's just, you know, as you're staying with this issue that you're working with, just notice any issue, any image comes, or any feelings, any words or phrases, and just take your time and just see if anything comes.
So that's the idea, that we don't have to. It's not just through the body that we can access these feelings, or that we can use the focusing.
Right.
It reminds me of I was working with a couple, and one of the partners had Asperger's, and when I asked, you know, what was happening right now, to kind of take a breath and see what he was feeling, and he said something around warmth, and I said, you know, where do you feel that in your body? And he looked at me and he's like, yeah, no, I feel it up here. You know, it's like a light radiating in my head, and he gave me this great image, but there wasn't a feeling in the body, right?
Right. Yeah. So you can work with that, or the light radiating in his head. Okay, well, just stay with that. See if anything more comes as you be with that.
Yeah, nice. Okay, another question from Alistair says, I'm interested in the intersection of attachment and non-attachment, paying attention to the stories as it contributes to their survival, and non-dual spiritual teachings that invite us to drop the story. How do we balance these two approaches? Yeah,
that's a good question, because I had familiarity with some of the non-dual teachings, and often they'll use language like get beyond your story. The story is kind of the beliefs you're having, the memories that you're holding in your mind, and the beliefs you've solidified about your life. So I did talk about this in the book too, how there's positives and negatives about that kind of language. I mean, the positive thing is there's a whole rich life that we can live if we can learn how to not get so attached to how our life has been, but also to open to how our life could be as we live in this more open-hearted way. But it can also be a subtle kind of shame, I find, if you think, well, gee, every time I have some story about my life, then there's something wrong with me, or I'm not doing the spiritual practice right, because sometimes it's not a story, it's a feeling. And those two can get fused in the minds of some of the non-dual teachers. I think there's often misunderstanding about it. It's not necessarily a story, it's old painful feelings that they maybe still need attention. So, some teachers might say, well, you're just holding on to, when you're in pain, you're holding on to some story about how your life has been, and you just need to let that go and get beyond that. But that's, again, a lot easier said than done. I think it's more wise and helpful to say, oh, okay, well, it's triggering old feelings of not being loved and cared about. Let's make a space for those feelings to be there. That must be really painful to feel that. So if you give empathy to the pain, the feelings are much more likely to shift then. Because I think in subtle ways, some of the spiritual teachings can actually put people in their heads. Like they're not really transcending their story. They think they're transcending their story. They're living more in the self-image of somebody who has transcended their story or transcended their feelings. And it's not deeply genuine. We really want to look at what's a deeply genuine spiritual unfolding, and it needs to include welcoming our feelings and not shaming ourselves or criticizing ourselves for having normal human feelings.
Mm-hmm. And my experience, John, is as we do that with people, myself included, but certainly with clients, as there is that embracing there that you're describing, that the story drops away, and later the story shifts because the way they view themselves or their experience also has grown through through the experiencing and sharing of the feeling.
Yeah, I think that's a more nuanced way to see it, that the story will gradually shift on its own without us having to apply any kind of willpower to it.
Right.
Which doesn't usually work well, as we simply be with the feelings, let them unfold, let them be heard. Then our sense of ourself begins to change, and the story begins to change, and more through the back door than through the front door of assaulting it in some kind of aggressive way. Yeah.
Right. Well, I think we have successfully spent an hour discussing and sharing your experience and wisdom, really, because you've been practicing working with focusing and meditation and really looking this intersection between passion and deep spirituality and connecting with others and those needs. The book is really brilliantly written, John, and I invite people to click on it. I think I've made it available in their chat bar to take a look at Dancing with Fire and cultivate these practices into their lives and into their relationships. So thank you so much for being on Talk Time with me.
I thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
All right, and we'll chat a little bit later, John. Thanks so much, and thank you for being here with me on Talk Time. And you can watch the replay of this later and watch for next month's guest expert who will be with me. So thank you all for being here.